Okay, so the first thing we need to do today is talk about tests. So, some of you will be going and taking some STAR tests this week, and all of you will be taking a summative in our class on Wednesday. So, I just wanted to go over just a few things about that. So, first of all, I just want everybody to remember that good test taking strategies are good test taking strategies. So, um, dressing in layers so if you get too hot or cold, you can adjust is a good test taking strategy. Um, Making sure that you've eaten before you take a test is a good strategy. Making sure it's not all sugary foods that you're eating is another good strategy. Listening to Mozart before you take a test is a good strategy. So anything that you think is good for taking care of yourself, good for anxiety, good for those kinds of things, is going to be good for a test no matter what day you're taking one. So just keep that in mind, especially if you are testing this week. Um, One more thing I wanted to show you was that you have a review for the test on Friday right here on our on the front wall of our classroom, and I'll go ahead and click on that just so that you can see what it is. So what you've got here are some words that you're going to see on the test. This is the academic vocabulary from the test. So the 5 things you need to make sure that you can remember are the counter argument, a thesis, what it means to convey, what it means to ask a rhetorical question, and then what it means to have credibility. Okay? There's a few other words on the test for you to know. Make sure you know pervasive, irreversibly, migrant, and prominent. So that is for the test on Wednesday. All right? Now, I wanted to go back to what we were talking about when we talked on Friday about the antecedent event. And let me go ahead. We're going to pause right here on this slide. By the way, notice you can control the slides right down here. Notice I put the antecedent scenario chart right here just to remind you what we went over when we talked about the antecedent scenario. This was on Friday. So the antecedent scenario is when you talk about what has been happening before the poem starts, what has disturbed the status quo and set the poem into action. And a big hint is use your imagination. There is no specific right answer as long as your answer is based on what you read in the poem. All right? We're going to talk today about the division of parts. That's the division into parts is the next step in that poetry, those poetry handouts after antecedent scenario. So it goes antecedent scenario, then division into parts. What it's talking about there are things like sections, lines, and stanzas, or parts, stanzas, and lines, okay? So basically you're just answering how many parts are there, how many stanzas are there, how many lines are there, and then analyzing about the breaks. Why are the breaks where the breaks are? How does that advance the poem? Okay, so that's what we're writing about today when we do this stuff. So what I want to look at is actually this chart right here. And it looks super complicated, so I want to kind of take it apart for you so you can see what it is, because it's going to take us through the next 3 days. So after we talk about division into parts, we'll talk about the skeleton of the story and we'll talk about the climax. But for right now, I want you to ignore these two. We're just going to focus down here on division into parts. Let me read through this again, and I want you to just kind of listen to how it sounds while I read it. And I want you to notice the one stanza, the first stanza, and the second stanza, and how they're kind of different. Okay, so it's called Wings. Alejandro was a monarch, damaged chrysalis left behind. I swung my net and missed him, his wings too wet to fly. Now, back to the kaleidoscope, vital fluid pumping hard, wings flapping for the flight ahead, worth it all despite the scars. Okay, so let me go ahead and open up. I've done a sample poetry handout on wings. So this is the wings example. Okay, so you can see I did my annotations there. There's the poem. Okay. All right. If we have time before the quarter ends, we'll come back and talk about meeting. We talked about antecedent scenario. So here's what I wrote for that. Someone has died and the author struggles to understand, just has to watch it happen. The author realizes that the world is still turning and that there was beauty to be seen. Okay, so there's my antecedent scenario. So today we're talking about division into parts. How many parts are there? Where do the breaks come? So this poem has 2 stanzas. So let's go back and check. Yep. one stanza and then a break, and then the second stanza. This poem has 2 stanzas. It's divided exactly in half with each containing 4 lines. Maybe the poet is saying that important and sad events can cause your life story to be divided into before and after. So that's what it really feels like to me, is that this stanza is the before stanza, and it ends in the death, and then this is the after stanza. And that sometimes when we have death in our lives, we have this before and after sort of thinking in our heads. Before that happened and after that happened. All right, so hope that helped you guys to understand how we're doing this division into parts stuff a little bit better. Let me make sure I talked about everything. I think I did. So here's what you're going to do for today. You're going to go into especially the summative, but into any of the poetry assignments, and you're going to make sure that you answered this question on division into parts right, that you talk about the number of stanzas and lines and why the author used the breaks when they do. What I'm going to do today is grade you based on your feedback on I'm going to put a little lesson response assignment in. So what you'll do is the lesson response assignment, and it's basically you're just telling me what you learned about today in our class watching this lesson. All right, that's it. Thanks so much.